Good evening and welcome to The World Today. For many years now, we have been discussing the question of Israel and Palestine. It's a question which refuses to go away. And one reason this question refuses to go away is that the occupation of Palestine by the IDF, the Israeli army and its political establishment, and of course by the State of Israel itself, is probably the last remaining colonial question inherited from the 20th century. My guest today is Amira Hass, one of the most critical and courageous journalists who lives in Ramallah, in the occupied territories, basically, and who writes for the Israeli daily newspaper Haaretz, which still exists, a liberal Israeli paper which still publishes Amira Hass and Gideon Levy and a handful of others who are critical journalists. It's very rare for some of the more critical articles in Haaretz, for instance, to be published in a liberal, so-called liberal paper like The Guardian. And the current wave of attacking all critics of Israel, a decision taken after the Second Intifada, as anti-Semites, is of course reached absurd proportions. But tonight we're going to discuss what is going on in Palestine now, and whether Palestine as such, as an independent entity, has a future, and the various different solutions being proposed by left and right. Amira, welcome. It's a great honor and privilege to have you with us. I know you're here to deliver the Edward Said lecture, memorial lecture in London, but as I said, let's go straight into the situation. We are now in a situation in Israel-Palestine where all hopes have died on both sides. You know, the Israeli situation and its sort of Trump-like prime minister currently facing charges of corruption. We know him, Netanyahu. On the Palestinian side, the PLO is very discredited for a variety of reasons, collaboration, corruption, etc. So we rely on journalists like you to tell us what's going on. So please tell us what is going on now.
That's quite an expectation. Maybe I will not be able to. Look, it's true. It's true that we are, when it comes to the struggle against Israeli domination and creeping colonization of the West Bank, I mean, and the isolation of Gaza, we are now on the losing side. That's for sure. The world seems to have gotten so used to it. On the other hand, in Israel, with all Netanyahu's corruption or deals or scandals or whatever, he's not been tried yet. He's quite popular, which only adds to the picture, and it looks like the Israeli policies or Israeli imperial policies are much more sustainable than we thought they would be maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So it's even worse than what you described, because there is a lot of hope for the Israeli right wing. The Israeli right wing feels very much on, as we say in Hebrew, on the horse.
We've won.
Yes, yeah, very, very strong and very sure of themselves, and God is with us, etc. On the other hand, because I live in the Palestinian society, I cannot share even Palestinians' sense of lack of hope, because I see a thriving society. Nevertheless, I see the resilience, I see the rootedness. I live through, I mean, I see people who are in such terrible conditions, brought about by Israeli occupation and Israeli policies. And yet, they are there. There is this presence. But the politics, if I may say, sucks. And PLO, as you said, is in bankruptcy. And Palestinian leadership is clinging to chairs, as people say, and you don't understand why.
Exactly.
And Hamas has been used, the aura of the armed struggle, also as a way to consolidate their personal, their own sectarian position. But then you look at the people, and I look at young people, and yes, they are desperate, and I mean, they feel desperate, but at the same time, you see a lot of knowledge to live, and knowledge to laugh, and knowledge to find leeways, to send their children to study, or to send their children to dance, and they all tell about this energy that people have, that we forget when we only talk about politics or about Israeli colonial methods.
This is, of course, true, but the same argument could be made about, for instance, the long British occupation of its colonies in Asia and Africa, that of course life goes on and oppositions arise and people know when to strike and when not to strike, to stay calm. All that is true. The situation in Palestine, I feel, is that there is no solution now being offered by most of the established states in the Arab world, who are in a complete, disaster story themselves, whether you look at Egypt, whether you look at Syria, we know, Iraq destroyed. The only organization which succeeded in doing so indirectly was Hezbollah, in its own fashion. But by defeating the Israelis, which created some hope that, if they can do it, maybe we can do it. So the idea of, which was the hope of many, we have to admit, of an independent Palestinian state is gone. If it exists, the South Africans who go there tell us it will be worse than the Bantustans, which of course, as many will recall, was one of the measures used by the apartheid regime in South Africa to cut off a large section of African people on a tribal basis. Not like the Bantustans, which had some limited autonomy, it will be worse. Armed struggle is completely useless because they'll be crushed, destroyed, bombed into extinction. The campaigns which are non-violent, like the boycott, divestment sign, are attacked as being anti-Semitic. So when you look at all this, what is the overall future likely future?
There has to be political struggle. There has to be development of political strategies, new political strategies, undoubtedly. In Israel, they say, Palestinian nationalism is dying. No, it's not the national movement that is dying. It's the PLO which is dying.
Exactly.
And now, one of the things that I learned to be more cautious about is that there are many terms, but the term of solution. Because solution brings to mind something which is final, something which is definite. Now we know there is nothing definite or final in history, certainly not solutions.
No.
So I'd rather look at phases, and that's why I also decided to not to engage in the discussion one state or two states. By the way, one of the reasons that I don't like to discuss the one-state solution, or whatever we call it, is because then it obliges us to discuss the rights of Jews in this state. You'll see how quickly this turns, and in a way, rightly so, because, we assume that one state is a stage when Palestinians are the stronger side, and they can achieve this one state, because Israelis are not going to give up their privileges. So we have, in order to engage in this philosophical discussion now, people are asking, so what are the rights of the Jews? And then you'll find many people will tell you Jews are not a people, and Jews should not be here, Jews are colonialists and they should go back. I know, I live there. I hear those arguments. So if a one state is some kind of a metaphysical undoing, or metaphysical and emotional undoing of history, then it's not what you are talking about.
No.
So I prefer not to talk about solutions right now. I want to talk about phases. The reality of Bantustans, this is the reality today of Bantustans. And the Israeli side wants to deepen it. There is a scholar, believe it or not, in Bar Ilan University who already says there should be Palestinian
enclaves.
They are enclaves, but they should be separate, run by some warlords, and each one will communicate with Israel separately. I always said that Israel, for the last 25 years, Israel has not been working towards the two-state solution, but the seven-state solution, I call it. And the question is, why Israel did everything possible for the past 25 years or 27 years, everything possible to foil the two-state settlement that we were talking about in the 70s, for example, which means Gaza and West Bank connected. East Jerusalem is the capital. Dismantling of all settlements. Borders, sovereignty of Palestinians in those areas where you have free borders and open borders and freedom of movement. So you see, the two-state solution is not dead. It was murdered. But because it's not a human being, it can be revived. And we have international law still on our side. And international law says that this occupation is illegal and the settlements are illegal. And I think we should not give up on this tool.
But let me just stop you there for a minute, because I know all these laws, of course, that exist in our past, but the United Nations, is not an abstract organization. It's concrete. And the bulk of the countries who are member states have no power at all.
Yeah.
Power, the General Assembly votes and will happily vote for the next 50 years for Palestinian rights and independence and put them on the Human Rights Committee and this, that, and the other. These are all tokens. They're nothing. Power is really exercised by the Security Council. On the Security Council.
But even the Security Council adopted they did adopt a resolution just before Obama left office, and it was not vetoed. Look, of course, I know that about these tokens, but it does put it is a compass. It is still a compass, and for Palestinians, surely it is a compass. When they talk about their rights, they look at international law. We have to use it. I don't want to idolize it.
We should use it, but who will implement it?
Look,
who will implement it?
But that's exactly the interaction that has to develop between Palestinian new strategies and new politics and Arab new politics and the attitude or the way that the world looks at its own laws or international law. But of course, the Israelis are violating international law every morning and evening on a regular basis for years already, and so is America and who else. But the fact is that it is still there, this law or this guidance that sees very clearly that settlements are illegal. Why give up on this? I don't see that right now Palestinians are strong enough to fight in whatever means those settlements.
No. I agree with you on that. That is not for this phase at all.
No.
But to have illusions in any Arab state at the moment.
Yes, of course. No.
Every Arab state. And even during the Arab Spring, the huge assemblies in Cairo and other, not a single slogan raised about Palestine. Not once.
Yeah.
Not a single demand that America,
I agree.
what it has done to Egypt, subsidizing the military, subsidizing dictatorships. No. It seems that there's been a huge regression in the Arab world.
For sure.
You know, even the tokenistic, automatic demands for Palestinian self-determination are now no
In a way,
longer
it's
met.
less hypocritic than it used to be.
It is.
But hypocrisy sometimes has a positive power, and even this
is gone.
has disappeared.
This is gone. No one cares,
Yeah.
you know, from the people
But
running
in
the
Europe, still, you know, if there is where this token of international law and the illegality of settlements, I think still is valid here in Europe, that can be used, can be brought up, and with it we can demand the governments to be less tokenistic.
But
Otherwise, you ask me to give up on everything.
no, I'm not asking. I'm
just, okay, for the matter of,
Yeah, no,
It's
I
when
think-
you hear the diplomats, there is such a discrepancy between the language and the deeds.
But let's talk about Israel.
Yeah.
You know, this is a society which is now totally, or more or less, totally dominated by the right, culturally, politically, in terms of its activities. It's not just that, of course, we agree on what's happened in Palestine, but Israeli society today is quite frightening.
Quite more than you know. Yes.
Yeah.
More than you know.
I don't think there's any answer to it.
Really?
There's only one way. Like, I would carpet bomb them.
You would
That-
carpet bomb them?
It's the only way you could deal with it. Like, or try to stop them a different way. It never worked.
These places are like really rightfully ours. Like if it was any other country that would have conquered these places or taken over these places, nobody would make a big deal. It's just because it's Israel and there's anti-Semitism and everything.
In general, the Israelis don't have a reason to give up on their privileges. They cling to them, they enjoy. In that sense, what the Oslo process did is really made occupation much more profitable to the Israelis than it used to be before. It's a deluxe occupation. We develop our main economical expertise, which is security and surveillance, and sell it to the whole world because we have the occupied territories, our private laboratory. So, and with the withering away of a welfare state that Israel used to be to a great extent in the 50s and 60s, it is withering away. So the option, the privatized option that people have, is going to the settlements, where they get better conditions and subsidies and tax reductions, etc., etc. Israel is doing many things to encourage people to go to the settlements, to live there, and yet only less than 10% of the Jews in Israel have chosen to move to the occupied territory. But still, the Israeli society is cruel and racist in general terms. And at the same time, of course, it's my people, I care for it. But politically, there must be a great political movement in the world that teaches the Israelis a lesson that occupation cannot pay forever. But so far, it does pay.
Yeah, it
We
does.
are, look, we look at with all the BDS, what we know about boycott here, boycott there, it doesn't change the basics that Israelis are welcome in the world. Israel, as an occupying power, is not seen as an occupying power. Somehow there is this schizophrenic attitude. You have Israel, good Israel, and you have the occupation. No, this is one. This is the very, very same one. It cannot come, the change cannot come from Israel. The change might come. I say, first of all, the beginning of a change has to be Palestinian politics and Palestinian strategies and resistance. It's for them to tell to the world, we don't want your donations because we don't want to meet those requirements that you demand of us. We can do without the donations. Or we don't want an Israeli approved ID, so we'll give up the IDs, which means people will not be able to to go abroad for several years. This is thing that I hear from Palestinians. It's not my own invention. But it has. I mean, we boycott military court, for example. But it has to be a very basic, a change, a very tremendous, deep change within the Palestinian thinking and politics. And this will take time. This will take long time.
Well, you need a new generation for that.
You need a new generation, and you need to liberate yourself from old axioms and from all kinds of slogans. And then you have developments among youth, Jewish youth in the diaspora. I just met a group of them a week ago. It's an American group called If Not Now. Very impressive, young Jews, very aware of their Jewish tradition, Jewish background, Jewish history.
We believe that we need to create a mass movement to force our community to ask itself, which side are you on? Do we support freedom and dignity for all Israeli Palestinians, or are we going to support Zionist occupation?
I won't be silent today, not when AIPAC wants that decision.
I'm here live at Jerusalem Day at the Damascus Gate, where anti-occupation Jews are blocking Damascus Gate.
There is a group here in England, Judas, also very, very charming, very active. They're not shy about their Jewishness. They are not shy about they are anti-Zionist and they are anti-occupation. They're not shy of admitting of all the, contradictions that we have also in our positions. As I told you before, I mean, yes, we are anti-Zionist, but if we lived in 1947 or 1946, 1 year after the Holocaust ended, would we be against the establishment of the State of Israel or not?
Well, as you know, it was a huge debate amongst Marxist and left-wing Jews.
Yes, but then, like Isaac Deutscher, he himself,
he broke after the 67 war.
Of course, because then you see the realities.
Reality.
But the thing is, what you do when I know both my parents, I asked them when I was 5 years old. I grew up in a communist family, and so it was very politicized. I asked them, how come you came to Israel if you are not Zionists? Imagine, 5 years old. I sensed it was in the air, and they didn't answer. They didn't know what to answer. And I found the answer years later when I was in Europe. And I understood that, especially after the Second World War, Jews were those who survived were even less welcome than they had been
Absolutely.
before. So, okay, but this is, we are 70 years later. And this is not, it is a combination of changes that had to occur, that have and can occur separately, but then to merge together.
Amira, we've been discussing many things, but one thing you said struck me, which is that we have to now think in terms of phases rather than solutions, because no meaningful solution which could be approved by any progressive is at the moment possible, more or less. So how would you describe what phase we're passing through in Israel-Palestine?
No, I mean, you have to be in the country to see. No, there is contact.
Okay.
We cannot call it separate Bantustans because there is still
contact.
Not only contact, but it's still the Palestinian Authority. Even in Gaza, you have very clear institutions that are operating both in Gaza and the West Bank. I see much more the danger in people's getting used to what I call the logic of the Bantustans or the logic of the enclaves, in the sense that they give up on the vast expanse that Israel controls, which is called the Area C, 60% of the West Bank, or they give up on the connection with Gaza. This is especially in the West Bank, and it always angers me. I see even Palestinians from Israel who are Israeli citizens who love to come over weekends to Ramallah or Jenin or Hebron because they don't feel this animosity and Israeli basic daily racism. So they come to breathe some free of racism air within the Bantustan of Ramallah. So this is a phase which has its potentials on both sides.
I was once asked by someone quite senior in the PLO leadership several years ago who was fed up listening to me at a conference being critical. And he came up to me and said, okay, in private I can even accept many of your criticisms you make of the leadership of the PLO. What would you do?
Yeah.
Just tell me, what would you do?
Yes.
So I said, I'll tell you what I would do, were I on
Yeah.
the leadership. I would declare to the world, there is no Palestinian Authority.
Yeah.
We are an occupied country, de facto.
Yeah.
We are therefore dissolving the Palestinian Authority. Go and take a running jump. We're not going to play your game and pretend we're an authority. And he said to me, many kids I talk to now say this, but they're kids. You're an intelligent guy. Why are you saying this nonsense? So I said, okay, we'll meet again.
Dismantling the PA as an institution which runs people's lives is impossible. The change has to be the political. But I'll give you an example. I had a friend who unfortunately passed away very young, and he was very much opposed to the PA. His daughter joined the young recruit of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to be a diplomat. So he was very proud of her, that she passed the tests. And she might be a diplomat or work in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So I see this, I live through this contradiction all the time. So people think in terms of the longevity of their dealings with the PA is much more than the tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. But the PA as an institution which runs the society, because Israel is not going to take over this part.
No.
Complete dismantlement is impossible. The thing is that what happens now is that the Palestinian leaders are using the one in order to maintain their positions and probably their personal calculations and improvement. And also they have an entourage around them which benefits economically from these positions, from the connections with Israel.
Yeah,
but there is also a Palestinian middle class, very modest middle class, that is afraid of a change right now because this will harm them. Now, for the past years, as long as there is no political change in the leadership, they don't believe that a change, that a long struggle will end up in something which is worthwhile. That's why, for example, people respect the young men who go and stab Israelis. Yes, they respect them because they feel that they are, no matter what we discuss, we can argue about them, they feel that they go and they show the contempt. But with all the respect that people feel towards those, and pity or remorse, the great majority of Palestinians do not join, have not turned it into a third intifada, into a mass movement.
No.
So it only strengthens my analysis that no, people now are reluctant to engage into a struggle, unarmed, semi-armed, whatever, against Israel because they are sure that it can have no results right now, or no positive results.
Mira, very good talking to you. Thank you for coming in, and
for inviting. Yeah.
we will continue the discussion.
Okay.
Thank you.